right ahead and get started, and we'll
Okay.
go from there.
All right. So my thesis is going to be a project where I produce, I guess, an artifact, and I am interested in creating a browser extension to connect PubMed records to SUNY optometry holdings via our link resolver. And the reason for that, I came up with the idea just in my job. I'm a librarian at SUNY Optometry, and I have a lot of users that our users use PubMed quite often because it's the primary portal to searching the Medline database. So for all kind of medical citations and articles, that's where everyone goes. And a lot of our users have trouble getting from the records in PubMed, which I included a screenshot of there, to full text articles. And PubMed does have certain services and capabilities that libraries can sign up for and use to connect to full text, but all of those seem to fail our users. And so I'm interested in observing exactly how our users are trying to get from PubMed to our full text articles, and using those observations to create a browser extension. So essentially what that would do was where every record that you can see in this screenshot, the browser extension would insert just a big button that says something like get full text, and clicking on that button would connect to our link resolver, which would connect our users to the full text if we own it. And if we didn't, it would immediately connect to our interlibrary loan service. So it's just kind of making the whole process more seamless for our users. Looking at different methodology that I would use, I'd be using a usability testing. There's a lot of literature out there. One of the main people and works is Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. I don't know if it's Krug or Krug, but he writes a lot about usability and usability testing, setting up scenarios, and walkthroughs. I think they're called cognitive walkthroughs, and that's how I'm interested in observing our users. And then in building the button itself that would appear through the browser extension that I'm planning on actually, I'm hoping to actually create it in JavaScript and jQuery, and just kind of using best practices based off of universal principles of design, and mainly, and other places. And that's pretty much it for slides. I'm kind of drawing blank on what else I'm supposed to be saying here.
Well, does this flow out of any particular classes you've taken? Just sort of curious where this sort of fits in the scheme of things. I can see the universal principles, I know, comes up a lot, but I was just wondering, maybe web design or?
Yeah. The course, I can't even remember which course used the universal principles, but that course was I think that was just information design. I can't remember.
501.
Yeah, but that course, and also web design, web development course was formative too, in just usability on the web.
And how are you going to do these observations exactly? Do you have a space where you're going to be able to do these? Or?
Yeah, what I'm intending to do, in the literature that I've been looking at so far, I've been looking at how other libraries specifically do usability testing, and what I'm planning to do is recruitment via email, or even just kind of setting up at the main information desk a sign. Usually there'll be some type of gift card or food or something, or just people that see people want to volunteer as they walk into the library. And there'll be a scenario where I'll have maybe an article and say, okay, we want to see how you find this article on PubMed and connect to the full text. And then they'll walk me through what they're doing. I'll be observing and taking notes. So there'll be a computer set up for them to do that. And as they walk through and tell me what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then I can see problems they run into, how basically see where the pain points are, and how I can improve upon those when I create the extension.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of this in terms of IDT that I could see it is more in terms of the design of the screen, where things should be, what colors you might use.
Exactly. Yeah, I should have included in the slides. I didn't think to. PubMed right now, there's just a bunch of different options, and they don't always lead to what people want it to lead to. Like, they'll give you a number of buttons to get the full text, but often if it's not something we subscribe to, they'll hit a paywall. So something like that, where with the browser extension, I can remove those elements from the page and they'll just see the one button for our resources. So it's kind of reading universal principles of design, and some other literature I've been looking at about cognitive load when people are doing searching and doing research, just really distilling the process down to a simple path to alleviate that frustration.
Right. Yeah. There's something called the uniform connectedness, which has to do with elements that are sort of connected visually, are seen as having similar properties. So what you want to do is sort of flip through the universal principles and come up with a set that you think will be like there's progressive disclosure, which has to do with, you want to start. Of course, you're not going to have a lot of that, but where you're starting at the highest level and then you move through to where you want to end up and find the actual text or whatever it is. But you need to make sort of decisions about what you disclose at each level. There's, I was just looking through different, there's color theory, you want to use contrasting colors, things like that. So I would look at the different, issues in principles. I mean, I think the cognitive load, I think you mentioned, I don't know, that's from, that's something that's also discussed a lot. And, that's sort of, the idea is with progressive disclosure is also something called scaffolding, which is a whole instructional concept in terms of you always want to start at the bottom and then sort of move up as you're getting information. Don't make things too complicated early on. You really, there are a lot of issues in terms of how that looks. So the coding of it, there might even be something about how you code it as well. That's up to you, but you may want to have something about, simple and ways that people could actually look at your code 5 years from now and be able to adjust it because of the way it's written.
Yeah.
So there are different ways to apply it, but you want to think maybe, I think, you want to sort of think about the web design class and think about how they, maybe even wrote the code or did the scripting in such a way that's sort of more elegant or more easily understandable in the future. There's even a principle called errors, which has to do with having an unintended result because of the way something's written. So you may want to just keep a sort of journal as you're going through the development of it to think about decisions you make and where you might be using certain principles. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does actually. I feel like that will help me from getting a little off course as well.
Yeah, you want to, think about how you do something, and if you can replicate it, use it, or even if someone else could replicate it. In other words, what process did you follow, and what particular um, principles did you follow? Sometimes that's almost after the fact, but you look back on it and sort of see how you did something. And
Yeah.
Russ, if I can
yeah,
make a suggestion or two.
sure.
When it comes to I have one question for you actually. Are you familiar with Google Scholar?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and why won't Google Scholar, or why can't Google Scholar be applied to your problem?
Okay, well, it's interesting. Google Scholar and PubMed are both similar in that they both provide links to any library's link resolver, but they do it a little differently. Google Scholars is a little more universal,
Okay.
and libraries sign up for it. Um, PubMed's mechanism, so PubMed tries to offer the capabilities that Google Scholar uses, but PubMed's is clunky. Every library has to provide their holdings, and the way that PubMed links it isn't really intuitive, so it involves hitting lots of paywalls. And so yeah, Google Scholar and PubMed both.
So it's not that you don't have access to Google Scholar, it's that you need to make PubMed work as well as Google Scholar does.
Exactly, actually, yeah. When we talk to our students, they use Google Scholar and PubMed a lot. PubMed specifically uses medical subject headings that Google Scholar doesn't, which makes it preferable for a lot of our users. So it's just a pain in the butt that Google Scholar works so well, but doesn't offer what PubMed does. And it's
Right.
a pain that PubMed doesn't link as easily and well as Google Scholar does.
Okay, well, I mean, right there, I think you could have like an entire chapter of your paper just comparing the interface between the two systems and
Yeah,
showing where Google Scholar goes right and where PubMed goes wrong. Um,
yeah.
another um, another like and you have these method principles, Steve Crud, with Don't Make Me Think. There's a lot from HCI theory, HCI being human computer interaction theory. Things they borrow a concept from linguistics called common ground, and there's one HCI theory that's about establishing common ground. So like I know that you hit the button type of stuff.
Okay.
Um, so the theory of common ground as it applies to human-computer interaction might be something akin to what you're looking for in terms of a big T theory to guide your design.
Yeah, that sounds good. I've been kind of touching upon different theories here and there, but it's hard to find something that's kind of unifying. So
Right. I mean, there's also the idea of watching a user and try to find the pain points. That kind of sounds like GOMS. I can't remember what goals, objective, like it's an acronym for something, but it's one of those HCI theories that IBM used to use in order to map user behavior and try to find where the process breaks down. But don't necessarily suggest using it because it's kind of restrictive and really long
okay.
to actually implement. I think Common Ground's a little bit shorter and freer for you to interpret. So But yeah, thanks for answering my questions.
Thank you.
I would say, Jill, you may want to think twice about including the observations as part of your work, only because it's going to require IRB approval and it may not be necessary. In other words, if you just document and write about your process for first creating it, where it ends up, so you go through just what we were discussing, what you were discussing with Dr. Usel in terms of a comparison and contrasting the two, and then discussing your coding practices, and then discussing your principles and how you create it, which really doesn't have anything to do with the observation. It just has to do with where you make your decisions. And then, perhaps walking through it with one person, maybe. But you may find you've got enough. And the observations might, drag things out. I guess that's your call, but
Okay. I wasn't sure going into it. I wasn't sure if I needed that hard data, if just kind of going into creating the browser extension would be me assuming too much, even though I already know that it's a problem. And I kind of already wanted to create it based on these best practices. I wasn't sure if I needed to, kind of.
I think you're going to reach that by comparing it to Google Scholar.
Oh, okay. All right. That does make sense.
I mean, you might have wanted that data, but I think, if you can find some published evidence to show that more people are using Google Scholar than using PubMed, that would probably suffice.
Okay. Actually, I think I came across an article that said just that, so that's helpful.
yeah, I mean, you're documenting your process. You're making it public. You're exploring it, why you do what you do, and you're going into your reasoning of how you lay things out. I mean, honestly, there's not going to be that much to test, in my opinion. I mean, it's sort of they use it or they don't. I suppose you could test their reaction to it. But I think what's important here is laying the groundwork, putting it together, creating the code, and putting a pilot together. And a lot of times, or almost all the time, to be honest with you, the students create a pilot and they just document putting that together.
Okay.
Because we used to find that trying to do first of all, doing observations, that's a class in itself, and it's, unless you really are skilled in that area or really willing to invest some time in how you're supposed to run those, there's something called, it's been a while since I ran these, but, it's called something like open thinking, where you get people to talk aloud, where you get people to actually speak what they're thinking, because that's really important, and you document that. It's a fairly elaborate process. And then you're doing sort of keyword searches on key terms that seem to keep cropping up with people who are testing it, and it would take a while. I'm not sure. That's usually where people already have a product and they want to test it and then create another one, based on feedback.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I always try to make a project as doable as possible, and I think you'll be okay. And I'm certainly willing to be on the committee for this. I know it sort of falls in between. There might be, I don't know, Dr. Usel, I know you teach web design sometimes, so you might be interested in this, just to sort of follow the coding process.
I might be interested in this. It's not an issue of my interest as much as it is of my time. I already agreed to be a primary reader for someone later today.
Right.
And I think there's another person that you suggested I do who on the schedule. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was the first one on the list. But I could be, I guess, potentially a second reader, not the primary reader.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, and that'll be fine. I mean, plus I'm teaching the course, so I'm sort of taking people who I feel could, sort of fall in there. And this is a little bit instructional, so it'll be interesting. I've usually worked with the librarians in the past because my degree is in information science. um, so so why don't we go with that for now, Jill? So I'll you can just I'll be the primary, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, sounds good.
Don't have to worry about the secondary for now. We'll see.
I'd also you're okay with me being the secondary, right? I don't want to push myself.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I'm happy with both of those.
So we're set. Yeah, I mean, neither of us are, or at least I'm certainly not an expert in coding, but I am an expert in design, and so we can sort of work on how you want things to look as you're developing it. And I think that's the main thing that you want to consider is what decisions you make as you go along.
Yeah.
So especially if you're comparing it to things like PubMed and Google Scholar, you may want your look and feel to be similar to those and sort of explain how you perceive those products and what their interface is like and how you would sort of make yours look and feel in a similar way.
Yeah.
So that would work. I'm sort of killing time here a little bit, although with reason, but also because I don't see Jorge here, and he's the person up at 6:25. And I don't like to jump around because sometimes faculty show up based on these time listings. But I think, have you thought about what your interface is going to look like?
Yeah, well, essentially, I don't want to do too much to transform the PubMed page since that's what people are used to. I really want to just simplify again, I really wish I included a screenshot. Let me go at least.
You basically just want to add a link to the actual document.
Yeah, so right now, this is how the results show up, and what I would do is just add a nice looking button beneath each of these records that says, some button that says, connect to full text or something like that, that I designed based off design principles where it's there for every record. And so people don't have to worry about cutting and pasting PubMed IDs in search box forms. It's just right there for them to click.
Okay.
It's still mostly the same exact interface. It's just now with this helpful button that will be, hopefully in a good location, a good color with nice text, decent size.
Another theory that you might want to reference is Hicks law and Fitts law.
Okay.
And they should both be in the Principles of Design book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hicks law is that the more options you give a user, the longer it'll take them to choose.
Yeah. Okay, I do remember coming across that.
And Fitts law is the size of the button will determine how long it takes to click it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Or the distance to the target and the size of the target indicates how long it takes to click it. So if you wanted to take it fast, you need to make it large and easier to hit, essentially. So.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I gave you a list of some in the chat box there. You might want to take a look at those. But there's quite a bit. And even the prototyping is important because it's this idea and proximity. I mean, if you look in the alphabetical contents, you're just going to see stuff that should jump out and give you a sense of what you might want to apply.
Yeah.
There's proximity, there's, so there's a lot of stuff that you probably just think of, but it sort of formalizes it and lets you sort of say, oh, now I understand. I mean, like if I look at this screen now, you know, a lot of it is identical in look and size and color, and some of it's required, I guess, probably most of it. But you do, you know, there is the page one on the right, which is, you know, a different size and a different color, and so and the search results, so that you want to think about those. I don't know how much control you'll have on those things, but you know, you may want to sort of rethink that a little bit. What, you know, what decisions did they make? And even if you can't change them, what issues you can see as problematic, and just write that up.
Yeah. Okay.
Part of your thesis. Um, but, oh yeah, I mentioned, yeah, uniform connectedness. So, okay, you've got stuff to work with. I think, yeah, it should do it. Good. You know, we do have some time. Don't see Jorge, so